Hello everybody, welcome to What Culture Gaming. I'm Scott, joined by Josh.
Hello, Scott.
Josh, our friend, down here in the wrestling studio on the eve of AEW Fight Forever. We're not sponsored by it, but our camera's dying, so we're down in a different studio to get the news done, because the news must continue. The news being physical media not being favoured as much by the industry as it once was. Many upcoming titles, big highfalutin titles like Starfield, Spider-Man 2, just not going to be coming with physical discs. So we're going to do a whole bit on why that is and what the hell's happening with the industry itself. I want to run some stuff down here. Spider-Man 2's Collector's Edition, coming later this year, won't have a physical disc despite it being $230 or 220 English pounds. Also, Batman Arkham Trilogy recently confirmed for the Nintendo Switch will only ship with Arkham Asylum, won't come with Arkham City or Knight. You'll have to download them, which kind of puts you at the mercy of the Nintendo Switch's 32 gig hard drive, which is very easily filled up. Arkham Knight was 45 gig on PlayStation 4 or Xbox One, so it's one of those things where you'll just have to wipe out your entire hard drive to try and make it fit. But if you're buying that cartridge using the handheld system as it is on the go, you won't even be able to play Arkham City or Arkham Knight. Starfield won't have a physical disc. Now, this was confirmed by Bethesda, answering a fan over on Twitter. Someone called Zoom just asked what's happening with physical discs. They replied and said all physical editions will include a code for the chosen platform. There are no physical discs. Now, they've deleted that comment because the reaction was, what the hell are we paying for if we can't keep the game? But it's worth just saying that stuff. There's more to this overall, but thoughts on the old physical media?
It's really snuck up on me, this, Scott Dilford. I think it's kind of snuck up on everyone. If this kind of happened 10 years ago, I think everyone would be talking about it. There would be outrage about the fact that they were trying to replace discs with just codes that you could download to affect the resellability of these titles. You know, there's stuff about Diablo 4 not being able to resell because it's tied to a Battle.net account and a bunch of other things and measures that developers seem to be more eager to take in the modern age. And I think a lot of us are kind of more fine with it or accepting of it because so many people buy digitally now, to the point where if you look at the sales of a game and you only go off physical sales, you just don't get an accurate number, because you can kind of see how well a game is doing in terms of its popularity, but the total sales will come well under, because a lot of people, or at least the majority now, are kind of swaying towards digital. And I think that's just such a shame. As someone who doesn't buy physical anywhere near as much as he used to, but still loves it for those big games. I recently just bought Final Fantasy 16 physically because I wanted that box. I will buy Spider-Man 2 physically because I want that box, and I would have bought Starfield physically if I didn't have Game Pass, and I would have wanted the disc there because I just think it's so cool to have that, like, almost ritual of going out to buy a game, having the box, having that fanfare around it, and to see, on one hand, developers moving away from that is a shame, but the more nefarious implications of they just don't want you to be able to resell these games as they never really have, that is more worth talking about, I think.
So there's more, that's the thing, there's more parts to this. I'm going to put a community poll out, so keep your eyes on the What Culture Gaming community page. I want to see what people do. I want to see if the average person does buy physical anymore, whether they favour digital. I definitely favour digital, but I like having a physical copy of things, so I like trading stuff in. Like you said before, Josh, the whole fact that you can keep a hold of a game, trade it in later, fold it into the next thing you want to buy, that favours the consumer massively.
It does.
So why not keep doing that?
Especially when games are £70. Like, that's a lot of money in a cost of living crisis. It's a lot of money regularly to fork out for these brand new releases, and I just think it's a shame that we're getting away, you know, in a small amount at the moment, but it could snowball to moving away from that mentality, to be able to buy a game and then use trade-ins to contribute towards that cost. Or, you know, say if you bought something like Redfall physically, like if that didn't have a disc in it, imagine trying to getting it, being disappointed and not being able to resell it or refund it. Like, that sucks in an era where games are kind of more broken than ever. Even the games I've loved this year have had a lot of issues with them. Final Fantasy 16 right now is overheating my PlayStation 5. And that is,
and even when it works, it has frame rate dips in the performance mode anyway.
Exactly.
So there's a couple of things to throw in here. One being a pretty big counterpoint. Speaking of Final Fantasy 16, this comes from GameIndustry.biz's Christopher Dring, saying that Final Fantasy 16's physical box sales in the UK so far have been 74% lower than Final Fantasy 15. Obviously, that's only the UK market, and that is only the physical release of that game, but it is a big premiere title. It's still put it above Dead Island 2 and Diablo 4 in terms of overall physical sales, but it is massively down on Final Fantasy 15. So I think that's an interesting side of it, because does the average consumer even care about this stuff? There's always a conversation online when someone comes out and says, look, we're not going to have a physical disc with the release, but the average consumer doesn't really seem to care. Like, it's always that thing of, why would you buy buy a physical. For us, it's maybe to trade in further down the line. Maybe it's a collectible or something. I love a good steelbook.
Absolutely.
Of an evening, yeah.
Yeah, I think, when it comes to the decision of digital versus physical media, I think it should always be a decision. Publishers have been pushing us towards digital over the past few years with streaming services, with digital-only releases, and digital-only consoles. Both Xbox and Sony have a digital-only version of their brand new machines to encourage you to go to that storefront. But when it becomes a problem for me is when you get the disc version of a console and you want to go out and buy the disc and you open it up and there is just a cold mix. I just think that is not a choice anymore. No. You are just buying the box, and yes, the box can still be cheaper than going onto these sometimes outrageous digital storefronts, but it should always be a choice, and it only benefits the publishers and the console makers when it isn't.
Also, the amount of time it takes to download a 50 to 70 gig game when you thought you were just buying the disc version of that game to help offload a lot of that installation time cost or whatever on the Switch, like the cartridges help with the storage side of it, which was the assumption with the Arkham trilogy, because like I said before, they obviously have optimized Arkham Knight the F down to make it fit on Switch, but you still have 3 games worth that have pretty sizable file sizes overall. Another thing to throw in here.
No, I was just going to jump in because you mentioned that about how discs kind of offset the huge downloads of some of these games. I think even that's starting to not be necessarily true, not just because of the Arkham example you mentioned here, but you look at Star Wars Jedi Survivor earlier this year, if I am correct, the amount of data on that disc wasn't much at all. That was a 120 gigabyte game, and the majority of it was a download, even if you had the disc. So it's it offsets a little bit, but it's not even like the quote-unquote olden days where you get the full game on the disc anymore, because even that's not necessarily guaranteed today. I think it was the same with Call of Duty last year. I could be wrong again about that again, but there definitely have been a few examples over the past year, especially.
Yeah, also, going forward, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is on multiple discs if you do buy it physically, but the digital side of that, the file size, assumedly is then something closer to 200 gig. Because you wouldn't have access to those discs to offset things. So I feel like we're in a bit of a transitory period right now in terms of the way the industry wants to approach releases, and they want to push digital stuff and digital storefronts and have a captive audience that has to pay that price. And the collectible side of it is where physical comes back in. It's worth mentioning as well in terms of why physical stuff going away matters, because various publishers have delisted games, especially this year. It happens all the time. But 2023 had delistings from EA removing Battlefield 1943, Battlefield Bad Company, and Battlefield Bad Company 2. Marvel delisted the Deadpool game across the last few years, as well as Marvel Ultimate Alliance 1 and 2. Some of the best games you could play. The newer games are brilliant, and you just can't access them anymore. So it's worth mentioning that sometimes great games do just go away, and they're only left to the people who have the discs. Which
absolutely.
Maybe you can't get anymore.
Which is nightmarish, because, you look at some games that have been delisted. I used to love the Activision Spider-Man games, or at least I used to love some of them. But because that license expired and those games are delisted, if you want to buy something like Spider-Man Web of Shadows, which is one of the most underrated Spider-Man games ever made that not everyone managed to play, you go buy a second-hand copy of that, and it's like £33. It's as much as a new game. The same with stuff like the old Silent Hills. If you want to go back and play Silent Hill 1 or even Silent Hill 2 on the PlayStation 2, at least in the UK, you're looking at like £90 for Silent Hill 1, and you're looking at definitely in the 40s for Silent Hill 2, which is kind of outrageous, right?
Yeah.
But if you look at stuff that doesn't even have that physical side of it, like you said, it just kind of goes away forever. And I think in media generally, we're at this kind of point, this fork in the road, where publishers are releasing stuff for their streaming platforms, and then when they decide, it's not successful, they don't like it, they're just pulling it from that streaming platform, and then it doesn't exist, and then you can't get it because there's not a physical version of it, and it's like that piece of history, that piece of art, even if it wasn't good, just doesn't exist anymore. And when that happens to games, especially for me, the most nefarious examples are games that could be played single player but have an always online component. Diablo 4, that always online component just simply isn't going to last forever. And if they don't patch in an offline mode, that game's just going to disappear. And in an industry, I think, that is already so bad had in terms of archiving its history. I just think we're moving in the wrong direction.
Yeah, that's a really good point, especially if you bring in Diablo. Just yesterday, Sunday, we're recording this on the Monday, that game went offline for most of its day because there was a DDoS attack to their servers, which, because that game fundamentally requires a server sync to even play single-player stuff, it just knocked everybody off for like hours and hours and hours. So it's like you're kind of tied to this server thing that you maybe didn't want to be, and because you have the disc, because you have the physical side of it, you should be able to get around that. In terms of where we're going, the last thing to throw in here is just something that's breaking from the Wall Street Journal, talking about YouTube/Google investing again in a Stadia-like service to access games more immediately. Their whole thing is this leaked service called Playables, which is designed to let you instantly stream various games straight through YouTube. The one that's been mentioned so far is Stack Bounce, which is just a game where you defeat waves of bricks with a ball. It's just Breakout. It's what it always was. But it's worth throwing that in here in terms of a streaming-based future, a digital-based future, and whether people actually want that stuff. Like Stadia obviously fell flat on its little bottom before, and I don't know whether that comes back around next time.
I don't know, man. It's like they're obviously trying to push towards a streaming future, and in the long term, I think a cloud-based future. You know, a big reason the Activision, Blizzard, and Microsoft deal hasn't gone through at this moment in time is because of the potential of cloud gaming going forward. So I think the shift towards that space where you don't necessarily own a game, you just own the ability to access it. That is kind of terrifying for me personally, but maybe I'm just old and not with the times anymore. Maybe that is the future. Maybe people are fine with that. Like, let us know down in the comments if you are. To me, it's a huge shame because it does lock people out of those games, and it kind of puts a timer on your game library to a certain degree.
That's definitely, that's the core sentiment here, at least from, like I said, our point of view, is that idea of taking away some of the stuff that the consumer has access to, just literally saying you just can't play these things that you once liked going forward. I'll put a little video here about some overlooked gems from the past that you should check out, and let us know what you think down in the comments below as to the physical versus digital debate. For now, I've been Scott from WhatCulture.com. There's an eel.
I've been the eel from WhatCulture.com.
And we'll catch you next time.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.